TG Tutorials.
I'm reliable. Hey guys, it's Matt here, and today I'm bringing you another episode of TG Tutorials. Now, if you are a longtime fan, maybe you're a fan who's just been tuning in somewhat recently, or maybe you're a first-time viewer who's never seen the channel before. You probably all noticed that things in here are kind of dark and dreary. And that's not how things always are, but the reason why we're doing this is because it's actually our first ever Halloween in July edition of TG Tutorials. Now, we've done Halloween in July before, but usually TG Tutorials doesn't really get thrown into the mix, but this time it is. So as you can tell, I'm also in costume as well. Definitely if you guys either know who I am or who I'm cosplaying, or maybe you want to just take a guess, you can kind of comment in the section, in the comment section down below, and I would definitely love to hear what you guys have to say. I'll confirm or deny any of the guesses. So what are we working on today? What am I helping you guys with today? Well, if you're looking at the title of the video, then you probably know, but basically with these Halloween in July editions of TG Tutorials, I'm going to try to look at some consoles that are dead. Now, technically, yes, all retro gaming consoles are technically dead, since they don't have any official, new first-party support. However, I'm looking at consoles that most likely, most of the time, had a very short lifespan, and sadly, they died very early on in their lifespan. And today, we're actually looking at the Sega Saturn. Now, in this case, what I'm helping you with is I'm actually showing you guys, especially some of you either Let's Players, reviewers, or just generally want to record some gaming content for some reason or another, I'm showing you guys how to take and capture your Sega Saturn footage and actually do that with the Roxio Game Capture HD Pro. So, right now I'm going to jump to exactly what you need.
So the first thing you'll need is a Sega Saturn, which I know is kind of a duh moment, but still it's always worth mentioning. Now I can't give you an exact price on this console, and the reason why is because depending on what year, month, or day you're watching this, it can definitely fluctuate, especially if you're buying this with a controller, without a controller, with a power cord, without a power cord, AV cables, all that different stuff, with games, things like that, in-box, out-of-box, sealed, all that different stuff. So all I'll say is, if you're buying it without all the bells and whistles, but hopefully potentially with a controller and AV cables or stuff like that, I would say that you should be paying under $100. And you'll also need AV cables, and I know to some people that might seem laughable, but I do bring it up due to the fact that the AV cables for the Sega Saturn are exclusively for the Sega Saturn. So you can't use other systems' AV cables on your Sega Saturn, and that's very important, and I sadly cannot give you a direct price on these AV cables because they do fluctuate. Some people want original ones. I don't even know if there are any other third-party ones, so I don't want to give you guys a bad price, but I would suggest trying to find a console with AV cables. And the next thing you'll need is a Roxio Game Capture HD Pro. Now I know this is another kind of a duh moment, but still, it's always good to mention. Now with the Roxio, I would suggest getting one brand new, and that's not because I'm getting any kind of kickbacks or anything like that. It's actually because this system actually comes with both a CD that allows you to install software that works directly with the Roxio, as well as a cord that is exclusive to the Roxio itself. Now that cord does plug into your PC or laptop just fine because it is USB based, but the other side of the cord only plugs into a Roxio. Unless you guys know that maybe plugs into some other things as well, you can comment below if you do know that, but as far as I know, it is Roxio exclusive. A brand new Roxio will cost around $100. Also, I would suggest getting two HDMI cables as well, but we'll get to that a little bit later. Now the next thing you're going to need is the Mini AV2 HDMI, or as it's also known as the AV2 HDMI. And the reason why you need one of these is because the Roxio only supports component and HDMI. It does not support composite. Now the difference is composite is 3 cables, component is 5 cables, and of course you guys know what HDMI is. Now the reason why I need to upscale this here is because even though yes there are 5 plugs, which you think, well then you can just plug in the composite into the component, but it will not read it. The program itself only reads component or HDMI. So we do need to do a little bit of upscaling here, but thankfully it is not in any way going to be as expensive as the FrameMeister. So the AV to HDMI actually costs around $10, and depending on where you get it from, you could be getting it alongside the mini USB, which you do need to power the system. But thankfully the mini USB goes right into a larger USB that can go right into your computer, your laptop, or something like that. So as long as you have a USB hub that has more than 2 slots, potentially 3 if you need to plug in a microphone or something like that as well, then you'll be fine and you'll be good to go.
And now that you know what you need, I'm going to show you exactly how to do it.
So the first thing I'm going to show you is where and how to plug in your AV cables. Now I know to some people this might seem really silly, but the reason why I bring it up is due to the fact that I grew up with PlayStation and Nintendo. So for me, when I first had to plug these in, it was actually kind of a foreign concept. Yes, you can look at the grooves and the pins and think, oh, I got this, no problem. But I would suggest if this is your first time using the Sega Saturn to plug the pins in gently. Now you can be firm, don't worry about that, but don't try to jam it in like you would your Super Nintendo cables or even your PlayStation 1 cables, because there isn't going to be a clicking sound. You're not really going to know if you've gone too far or haven't gone far enough unless you notice there's some kind of issue when trying to record your video and your audio. And now let's look at the AV to HDMI. On this side you can see is where you plug in the composite cables, and then turning it around you can see that this is where you plug in your first HDMI. This is considered the output, but don't plug it into your TV or monitor just yet, or frankly at all. I'll explain why a little bit later. And as we turn this around, we can see that this is the side where you plug in your mini USB. Also, if you're not NTSC like me, you can actually turn the switch over to PAL. And now let's look at the Roxio. This side says video input, so that's where the HDMI from your AV to HDMI goes to. And as we turn this thing around, we can see that this side says video output, and that's why you need that second HDMI cable, because that HDMI cable will go into here and then go into your either TV or monitor, whatever you're using to watch the footage. And as I'm sure you guys can see, there's that little weird hole to the left. That's actually where you plug in that cord that I was mentioning earlier, and that's kind of the reason why you do need to get the Roxio brand new, or at the very least with that cord intact. Now we're going to do something a little bit different here. Before getting to the laptop and showing you how things will look there, let's show you how things will look from the outside if you've set up everything correctly. Now before you turn the Saturn on, whatever the HDMI is connected to, TV, monitor, whatever it may be, there should be a blue screen. Yes, the blue screen is normal. However, after turning the system on, the blue screen should go away and the game should start to run. After installing the program on the CD that came with your Roxio Game Capture HD Pro, click on this icon right here to open up the program. And after that, this will pop up and then it will transition into the program itself. And as you can see, there's capture and there's also edit and share. Personally, I don't really use edit and share because it opens up Roxio's own video editing software, and I'm not really a big fan of that myself. So for the purposes of this tutorial, let's press the capture button. And if you've set everything up correctly, your screen should look just like this. Now, for some reason it doesn't. Maybe there's actually a blue square right here instead of the actual game or menu or whatever footage you have going on. Then there's a good chance that your input is not on HDMI. Make sure to check that. Make sure it's on HDMI. Remember that, yes, we are using composite cables, but we are upscaling them. So in this case, the Roxio is reading it as HDMI, not component. So do not make sure it's not on component. Now, let's say it is on HDMI. There's a good chance that maybe your computer or your Roxio software is a little bit confused. Change the component, then change it back to HDMI and see if anything has changed. Now, also want to mention as well that the settings will have it at M2TS. That's just the file extension. Really, if you have a problem with that for some reason or another, then you could just use a free software like any video converter or Handbrake to convert it. Handbrake for Mac users, because I don't think any video converter is on the Mac, but I do know that Handbrake is also on the PC as well. Also would like to mention that I use Adobe Premiere Pro CS6, so really I have no problem using M2TS files, but if you do, again, you can convert to MP4 or whatever file you might need. So let's scroll down here, and this is the save to. Actually, before we even get to save to, let's go to set capture length. Personally, I don't really use set capture length. I don't really have a need for it. I just start and stop when I need to. Also, you might forget, so you might set it to a certain length and all of a sudden you forget, and then there's, definitely some issues down the line depending on how long you record your footage. So really, I don't use set capture length, but if you want to, it is there. Now, when it comes to quality, I have quality all the way down here, and the reason why I do is because of the fact that my computer can't handle going all the way to the top. Now, if yours can, then definitely use it, right? Use it to your advantage. Make sure that you remember that not all computers are the same, and try to see what your computer can do. Do a few test runs and trials before you just go live, before you try to record something for a long period of time, because you definitely could end up having a big problem on your hands, because you really don't want to waste any time, especially when you're trying to put stuff on YouTube or doing reviews and Let's Plays and things like that. You don't want to waste hours and hours. I mean, that's just terrible. So make sure that you see what your computer can handle. If there's any graphical glitches or anything like that in the recording, there's a good chance that maybe you had too many things running or you had the quality set too high. Now you might be wondering, but Matt, I want to make sure that my viewers get the best quality. It's going to be a little bit too low. Is that a problem? Well, personally, I would say that we are using a very cheap upscaler at this point. I highly doubt that people are going to notice if your quality is set this low versus being set the highest. We're not using a FrameMeister here. Anyway, so scrolling down down to the save to, that's just where you save your videos. I just have them saved in the default video section. I end up moving them to another computer to actually use the video editing software anyway, so really I don't care where it saves to. Same thing with the prefix. The prefix actually like the date, because sometimes you might, when moving files around, it'll say that this was composed on a different date, and sometimes your computer will say, oh, it was last modified, rather than when the file was created. So personally, I do like to have the prefix being the day that the file was saved. It just makes me feel more confident in knowing if for some reason I need to look back and see when something was filmed, when it was edited, something like that. It always feels good to know that, oh, this was filmed exactly at this date. And also the fact that, you're going to have to change it every single time. So if you change your prefix to, in this case, it would be something like Virtua Fighter 2 Episode 1. The next time you have to change it to Episode 2, and etc., etc. So you don't want to have any issues, any files potentially being overwritten, or any like weird stuff like that. So personally, I just leave the prefix as is. So moving forward, we can see down here that says time elapsed, file size created, record time left, and space left on drive. Personally, I just care about the space left on drive, not really the record time left. And the reason why I don't care about that is because it never seems like it's fully accurate, especially because it can change when you're recording, a Saturn game versus something like a PS4 game. So personally, I don't really adhere to that. However, going over here and showing something that I really don't adhere to is the enhance picture setting. So looking over here, we have brightness, hue, contrast, and saturation. Use none of these. None of these will help you, I swear. But you know what? You don't believe me. You don't believe me, and that's okay. I'm going to show you firsthand why this brightness is the worst. Let's put it up to, that's almost the highest. Look at that. It's overlaying. It isn't, I guess underlaying is a bad word. It isn't a backlight, it's a front light. So even if you put it like this, look, it's still going over the actual screen itself. So personally, I'd rather just hit reset, leave it like this. I know it might look dark to some of you, but in your video editing software of choice, you can easily brighten up the picture without actually compromising it, or at least compromising it as much as it is here. So frankly, if you think this is too dark, I totally get you. I sometimes think that some things are too dark when recording with the Roxio, but I do not in any way use this internal software to try to fix either the brightness, the hue, contrast, saturation. I would just rather leave that alone. Now, even though we're not looking at live streaming today, if you do want to live stream, remember that Justin.tv is actually turned into Twitch. So that's actually Twitch now, so you can put in your Twitch info, and you can actually stream from Twitch through your Roxio Game Capture HD Pro. So that's actually pretty cool as well. I personally don't, however, don't have a computer powerful enough to stream on Twitch. So yeah, I personally just, that's kind of why I'm just doing stuff on YouTube, and that's also at the same time why today we're just doing this tutorial via just recording footage in general. So speaking of some interesting stuff, now let's move into interesting stuff. This is mute preview audio. So the reason why that's important is because I assume you're going to have this hooked up into a monitor of some kind or a television screen. Don't actually look at this footage right here. Don't actually look at this program to try and focus on where you're going in a game or anything like that, because it is actually delayed. So the screen right here on the Roxio is delayed. So never focus on that when you're playing a game. Focus on your external TV or monitor that you're setting, that you're connecting this to. So I would suggest that you mute the audio. However, I mean, you don't have to mute the preview audio if you don't want to, but if you have for some reason or another, you have the audio on your computer and you don't want to turn it off for some reason, then I would suggest muting the audio right here, so that you can just have everything going on in the background that you have going on your computer, instead of having to just leave this on, because then of course you'll have audio from both your television and your computer competing, and one is delayed. So I would definitely look at that and potentially mute the audio if necessary. Also, full screen, I really don't care, and for me that kind of makes things a little bit wonky, especially because I'm using open broadcast software right now to record this, so I'd rather not click that. You can click grab snapshot, but really you can also take a snapshot in your video editing software of choice, or in any media player that exists right now. So frankly, I'd rather not freak out and try to grab a snapshot while I'm playing the game, rather get it in post-production. Now, adjust recording audio. That's interesting right there, because of course you could mute that. I would suggest not. I mean, of course, if you're streaming on Twitch, you do what you got to do, but when it comes to recording stuff for YouTube, or just recording stuff in general to edit later later on. I would suggest leaving in the audio in case you need it for some reason or another, but muting it in post in case you don't want it there for some reason or another. So usually our Let's Plays are muted unless they're horror games or heavily reliant on sound. Usually they're muted, but in the off chance I need them for a review or something, maybe a glitch or just something that I need it for. I always want to future-proof my videos in the off chance that I really do need that sound. And it would be terrible to, speaking of the fact that we're using the Sega Saturn right now, if you have a 60-hour RPG or something like that and you kind of need to go back and get the and get some footage or something, a cutscene or something like that, it's gonna be a little bit problematic. I don't know about you guys, but I have a lot to do, so I cannot don't have the time to to try to go back and do stuff like that. Also, as you can tell here, there's the green start capture button. Be very careful when clicking start capture, because if you have a touchpad, if you click a little bit too hard and it thinks it double clicks, you could easily not realize that you've stopped recording and you literally recorded a 0 megabyte file, or there's just some other error that ends up happening and the file doesn't compile correctly. Let's say you've done a 30-minute Let's Play or 30-minute, you've gotten footage for 30 minutes, and then all of a sudden you double-click the Start Capture button, and all of a sudden the file didn't compile right because it thought, oh, let's open up a new one right now. That can definitely hurt your footage. That's the word I was looking for, your footage, and that has happened to me before. So I talk about this from experience. Now, once you've actually saved something from Start Capture, it'll be down here. I would suggest trying to clear those out. Don't delete the files, but you can right-click and you can clear them out. I would suggest doing that because your Roxio will start to malfunction and have some weird errors if you have a large amount of preview videos down there in your recent capture section. So now we're going to move on. Before we wrap things up, we're going to move on. Okay, so up here it says file exit. No, thank you. Tools options, that's what we need. So let's go over here and we can see that the profile is at 480. You can go 480 or HD 720p. Personally, I leave it at 480. I don't really care. If you guys do, if you're big sticklers for that, or you think your fans are big sticklers for that, you can change it. Again, we're using an HD upscaler, so I don't really think it matters that much, but if it does to you guys, then please obviously change it to your liking. And also remember, really see or at least try to see what your computer can handle. Now, hotkeys are good because, of course, looking at, I mentioned just earlier, your touchpad and how that can be an issue, or even just your mouse pad when you're trying to actually click on Start Capture. So you could use the hotkeys if you want to. I don't use the hotkeys, but still, if you feel the need to, if you feel like you might mess up with the touchpad or it's kind of wonky, maybe that's what you need to use. Now, if you're doing a live stream, of course, you can change all your stuff right here. Again, I don't use that myself, but still a lot of cool stuff here that you can change. Also, speaking of talk about the audio device. Oh, that's interesting. It only registers. It's not registering my oh God, it's not registering my Yeti. That's odd. I wonder why it's not registering my Yeti. Open broadcast software is, and that's what matters. But because that's how we're recording everything right now. But anyway, so before we wrap things up, I want to mention, not sure what's up with my Saturn. I could swear that I feel like every time I turn this Saturn on, it's asking me to do the menu stuff again. Is that an issue with the battery? Do I got to replace the battery? Tell me in the comments below. That'll be very interesting. Maybe I'll replace the battery for an episode of TG Tutorials. Either way, hopefully it doesn't happen in the future. I would like to get some more games for my Saturn. Instead of just playing fighting games, I would like to play an RPG. But anyway, now that we're done with this portion of the video, let's jump back to me in front of a shelf.
Alright guys, that about wraps up this episode of TG Tutorial, and tune in next week for something completely spoopy. Alright guys, so take care, tune in next time, and thank you all so much for listening in and watching. Hopefully you did both. Alright guys, so take care and tune in next time. See ya.